and we're trying to figure out why. It is always a difficult task to try to assign reason to an irrational act. But that is one of the things that Pima County, Arizona Sheriff Clarence Dupnik is trying to do. And the sheriff joins me now. Sheriff, thank you for waiting. I'm sure you heard that emotional interview with little Christina's father, John, and I'm sure it's just one of many encounters that you've heard with parents and with loved ones of the victims of this tragedy. I appreciate you giving us your time on what's a very, very busy day for you as well and for your investigators. I want to start with you on the indictment, on the criminal complaint that they just made public against this Jared Lochner, talking about a possible assassination attempt and the letter that was found inside the safe in his room. Can you tell us anything about that specific letter, Sheriff?
Yes, I can. It was a letter, and I'm just going to do it in generalities, wherein he indicated that he was going to kill that bleeping lady.
It's clear to you that Gabrielle Giffords was his target for whatever reason.
There's no doubt about it. We've done enough investigation in conjunction with the FBI that there's no doubt in our mind that this was an act of a single, very troubled individual.
Sheriff, why? Sheriff, I mean, I almost feel silly asking the question, you know, because, as I said, who can explain the mind of somebody like this? But was there something about Congresswoman Giffords, as far as your investigation shows, that set him off?
There are a whole lot of people in this country that are very angry at the politics of people like Gabrielle. There was a lot of vitriolic statements made night and day on radio and TV about her support of health care, about her support of some of the other things. And some of the vitriol got a lot of people agitated. But you took the words out of my mouth. You know, you're talking about irrational behavior here, and there's no way that I know of that you can rationalize irrational behavior.
Right. I want to ask you about that because that's something you've mentioned the past couple of days, and I just want to ask you whether there is anything you've uncovered in your investigation so far that suggests this suspected killer was listening to radio or watching television and in any way inspired by what he heard or saw.
Well, I know that there had been some contact with Gabrielle Giffords in the past. We have, as a matter of fact, a letter from her that was dated in 2007, where I don't know what prompted that particular letter, but she had agreed and invited him to a similar event back in 2007, so there is some history.
Right. He had, according to the criminal complaint, he had shown up at one of her Congress on the Corners events, and then there was a letter following up, I guess, in response to that. Or there was some correspondence about it. But what I'm wondering is, do you have reason to believe that this particular suspected killer was taking in information or was in any way influenced by the vitriol or the rhetoric that you're referring to that, you know, has been out on the airwaves?
If your question is specific, I have to be specific and say I don't have that information yet. The investigation is in its very initial phases. But my belief, and I've been watching what's been going on in this country for the last 75 years, and I've been a police officer for over 50 years. There's no doubt in my mind that when a number of people night and day try to inflame the public, that there's going to be some consequences from doing that, and I think it's irresponsible to do that.
Is that, Sheriff, just, it sounds like you're being very honest that that's just your speculation and that's not anything that's fact-based at this point?
That's my opinion, period.
And, you know, we've had some people question whether that is something you should be sharing now because tempers are already inflamed. People are upset about what's happened. The grieving families are still mourning. The bodies have yet to be buried. And is it the time, really, to be injecting speculative opinion like that into this case by somebody like yourself, the sheriff?
Well, I think difference of opinion is what makes the world go round and round. But I think it's irresponsible for us not at some point to address this kind of behavior and try to put a stop to it. There's no doubt in my mind that there are consequences to this kind of behavior. When people, allegedly credible people who get up in front of cameras and microphones and say things that are not true and try to inflame the public, when millions of dollars are filtered into this country to buy very vitriolic ads and they don't have to be identified, the countries that they're coming from or the people who are donating them, I think it's time that we take a look at it. I think free speech is free speech, but it's not without consequences.
And with respect, Sheriff, I know that you're a Democrat and you ran for office as a Democrat, and I just want to press you on that a little, because I'm sure some of our viewers are asking themselves why you are putting a political spin on this when they may be asking why you, the sheriff, aren't just focused on the facts, on uncovering the facts.
Well, I think that it's more than just a political spin. I'm not sure that it really has anything to do with politics. You know, I grew up in a country that was totally different from the country that we have today. We didn't have this kind of nonsense going on, and it used to be that politicians from different parties could sit down, forget about their ideology, and work on the country's problems. We don't see that happening today. As a matter of fact, we see just the opposite. We see one party trying to block the attempts of another party to make this a better country. And I think that it's time that we as a country need to look into our souls and into our hearts and say, is what we're doing really in the best interest of this country, or is there something better that we can do?
Now, that's a fair point. You know, I'm separate and apart from what we saw in Arizona yesterday. I mean, you could make the argument that we just need to come together as a country. But I think, you know, people are looking at what happened in Tucson, and what you seem to be telling us, what the feds seem to be telling us, is we're dealing with, and I don't use this term legally, I'm not trying to say anything about how this is going to plead out in a courtroom, some sort of madmen, you know, just like we've had in the past, the assassination of Robert Kennedy, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, you know, the assassination of Martin Luther King. As you refer to a time gone by, there were madmen then, there are madmen now. And it just, you know, is it really the place of a sheriff to stir the pot on either side of the political aisle?
Well, I guess that's for the listeners to decide.
That's fair enough, sir. I appreciate that answer.